Hello and welcome. I'm John Bachman, noon here on the East Coast, 9 a.m. on the West Coast.
Hi, everybody. I'm Bianca De La Garza. So great to have you with us here this Friday. And, John, it's also Earth Day. President Biden will be heading to Seattle to talk about climate change there. Yeah, they continue to push their green agenda, but the administration is facing new pressure from both Democrats and Republicans alike when it comes to illegal immigration and those COVID-era expulsions made possible by Title 42. The chaos of the migrant surge at the border spilling over into non-border states. Now another one of Greg Abbott's buses arrived in our nation's capital last night from Texas. The White House still shows no sign of backing down on their plans to end Title 42, even with at least a dozen vulnerable Democrats facing midterm challenges coming out against the president. And for the very latest now, let's welcome in Chief White House Correspondent James Rosen. James, good afternoon.
Hello, Bianca and John. We're also following a set of comments that the president made yesterday on this West Coast swing that are turning eyebrows today. Mr. Biden was just wrapping up his 25-minute speech in Portland, Oregon, touting the impact there of his bipartisan infrastructure spending package when, seemingly as a kind of a pep talk, the president abruptly closed with an exhortation for Americans to, quote, stop feeling sorry for themselves.
Anything's possible in America. Anything's possible. And that's what we're going to do today. Do what we are capable of doing. Stop feeling sorry for ourselves. Get the hell up and take this country back in a way that we lead the world again, because we can do it.
What they're doing is confirming what everybody in Wisconsin.
When the president's remarks circulated online. All right, sorry about that. We were expecting to hear some reaction from a Republican congressman to those remarks from President Biden. When they circulated online, they drew swift comparison to the so-called malaise speech by then-President Jimmy Carter in July 1979. That French word malaise never crossed Carter's lips, but he did use the televised address to urge Americans in another season of runaway inflation and high gas costs to lift themselves out of a quote-unquote crisis of confidence. Now, with the White House and Democrats on Capitol Hill increasingly anxious about the dwindling time left in which for them to enact major domestic legislation this year, published reports have said President Biden will tailor his midterm messaging accordingly, emphasizing the big-ticket items the Democrats did get passed, along with solid growth in unemployment numbers, while sharpening attacks on the GOP. And in a half-hour talk at the Portland Yacht Club yesterday, the president told DNC donors, and I quote, "What's happened is that there are a number of Republicans who know better, but they're afraid. I'm sure my colleagues can tell you from the Senate, at least 6 United States senators have come to me and said, I know I should vote for this Joe, but if I do, they'll primary me and I'll be out." It's not very courageous, the president scoffed, but the far right has taken over that party. This is not your father's Republican Party by any stretch of the imagination, the president added in his remarks at the Yacht Club. This is the MAGA Party, not a joke, unquote. Finally, the Washington Post has reported, and the White House has confirmed, that Tina Flournoy, the White House Chief of Staff to Vice President Harris and a longtime Democratic Party power player dating back to the Clinton era, will be leaving her White House job by the end of the spring. That would mark at least the 12th departure from the White House staff of Vice President Harris, what appears on its face an unusually high turnover rate with less than 18 months on the job to date. John.
James Rosen for us live at the White House. Thank you, James.
Are you hearing that he might resign? Is there any reason to think that might happen?
I've had some few discussions. My gut tells me no. I'm seriously thinking of having that conversation with him tonight.
Well, that's leaked audio that was broadcast all over the internet. It's a call between Liz Cheney and Kevin McCarthy just days after January 6th. And according to the tape, McCarthy said he would talk to former President Trump and recommend that he resign. He initially told the New York Times that he didn't say that. Well, joining us to discuss this is GOP National Spokesperson and Director of Black Media Affairs, Paris Denard. Great to have you with us, Paris.
Hey, Paris.
Hey, John and Bianca. Good to have you.
Well, Paris, again, we see, I don't know, Liz Cheney denies that she actually leaked this audio, but she's the other voice on the tape. She's on the January 6th committee. Why is this coming out now as well? Why do you think, this is making news now, other than the book that's about to come out?
Well, I mean, this is why it's making news. It's because whoever had the audio decided to leak it to promote the book and to try to increase book sales, to sell more copies because people might be interested in palace intrigue inside the Beltway. But, you know, from the RNC perspective, we think the American people are more concerned about rising gas prices, inflation, the wide open border with the fentanyl that's pouring over it, hurting and killing so many Americans, while Joe Biden sits from his elite places that he goes around the country, like the yacht club.
You gotta love the irony. Lecture. This is not your father's Republican Party, he said from the yacht club. Gosh.
Yeah, and then before that has the audacity to lecture the American people to tell us not to feel sorry for ourselves. Well, you know what? Stop making excuses for yourselves, Mr. President, because all you do is make excuses for the failures that you have and the crises that you have created that is wreaking havoc on our economy, that is hurting so many Americans, and that is making us the embarrassment of the global stage. And so the DC elites can try to leak these tapes and try to make it about something that is not really about reality. The reality is the American people are suffering because of the hands of Democrats' policies coming from the White House and coming from the House and the Senate controlled by Democrats. Those are the issues that I think voters care about much more than some audio tape or a book that's coming out.
Well, they'll be leaked, and of course the media will continue to play them, you know, to push those book sales, as you note there. But we want to ask you, though, now that it's out there and they're claiming they have more, Paris, do you think this helps or hurts the January 6th committee's case against Donald Trump?
Well, you know what? I think that this January 6th committee is a fake committee. It's a joke. Everyone that knows it, the things that they're doing are well beyond the scope of what it should be. It's not about justice. It's not about trying to find solutions. It's about doing something that is literally attacking innocent Americans who were nowhere near Washington, D.C. 90% of the subpoenas that they have issued come from people who weren't even in D.C. And I think the Wyoming GOP, the House Republican Conference, and the RNC have made it very clear about how we feel about Liz Cheney's lack of leadership and her position on this sham committee. And so I think that, again, the American people aren't going to be focused on whatever this partisan committee has to decide and what they're focused on, because they're not focused on getting at the truth or justice. They're focused on trying to relitigate Donald Trump, relitigate the 2020 election, and trying to make it seem as if Republicans are not doing what we are doing, which is fighting for the American people, trying to make things better, try to uplift and empower the American people. This is embarrassing. And Liz Cheney and all those on this commission should be ashamed of themselves for what they're doing.
It's one of the most passive-aggressive things you will ever see as well, because not only are they trying to paper these folks and cast them as insurrectionists, like you said, Paris, even though most of them were never there, those that have been subpoenaed, they're also just trying to rack up legal bills for these folks. Donald Trump Jr. is going to have to testify. I talked to so many people who've been asked to go up there and testify, and they're coming out of pocket for massive amounts of legal expenses. And, you know, I'm sure Liz Cheney loves that. Anyone in Trump world who has to shell out of their own pocket to defend themselves against these types of allegations, you know, I'm sure she's getting, you know, a real pleasure trip off of that, Paris.
Well, I'm still waiting for Speaker Pelosi to be called to testify.
Me too.
To see what she knows, to see what she did and what she did not do. You know, I think that, again, the American people aren't focused on this. The Democrats are using this as a smokescreen to deflect from their failed leadership and how they have just literally run this country in the ground. And American people are suffering because of Democrat policies that are coming out of this White House and the House and the Senate. And so they're trying to just distract from that. But the American people aren't going to be distracted, because the American people are living every single day and are experiencing how bad it is under this Biden-Harris administration and the policies that are coming from Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. The American people are rejecting it. That's why the polls are saying that. And that's why the RNC is stepping up to engage with voters through our community centers, and especially at gas stations. You know, our chairwoman was just at a gas station in Michigan registering voters.
Right. And that was a brilliant move there, because, you know, people are feeling it in their pocketbook. But we also want to talk to you about the border crisis, Paris. You know, Democrats are now pushing back against Biden's open border policies and his plans to end Title 42. Here's what Democratic New Hampshire Senator Maggie Hassan said was needed during her recent border visit. Let's listen in.
It is very clear that we need a lot more personnel. It is very clear that we need a lot more technology so we can really understand what's happening at the border. It's also really clear that the administration needs to address certain gaps in physical barriers along the border.
I think she's saying build the wall. Now, granted, she's running for re-election, but you have a Democrat, literally, who's from a state that borders Canada, not Mexico. I mean, that's something that she's even coming out speaking like this.
Yeah, well, I think the senator's doing political theater. I don't know if she really believes that, but I think if she really does want to do something about the border, she should talk to Joe Biden and tell him to follow suit and actually visit the border, because the RNC research team can find no record of Joe Biden visiting the border as president, vice president, or senator. So yes, how about he go to the border? And yes, how about he actually finish the wall, build the wall? President Trump did it, work with congressional Republicans, and we know that it worked. But because of Joe Biden rolling back all of the policies that President Trump put in place that kept us safe, we now have people on the terrorist watch list trying to get into through the southern border. We have fentanyl pouring over the border, killing so many Americans, being the leading cause of death because of overdoses for Americans 18 to 45. This is record numbers of illegal immigrants being taken into custody at the border like we have not seen in decades. And all of these things are happening because Joe Biden refuses to do what is right. And to do what is right means to admit that President Trump was correct and his policies were working. And that is what we need to return to make this country safe and secure. Border security is national security. And this country deserves to have a president and an administration who understands that. But what we get from Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, who was put in charge of the border, is nothing but failed policies. It's time for them to step up and do the right thing. And if Democrats who are in disarray continue on this line, trying to act as if they really care about the border, then you know what? They should actually talk to the administration and make them do something. But we all know who does care. It's those Republican governors who have lined up.
The ones who are really paying the price, the ones who are dealing with these fentanyl overdoses in their states. Paris, we got to run, but great to talk to you as always. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, I'm Rob Finnerty. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please join the conversation in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, too. Hit the bell icon to be alerted to breaking news. And remember, there's a whole lot more on Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news network. Newsmax TV, where real news for real people.